Okay. Tonight we got Allan Bryce, and he's a publisher of Dark Side Magazine. And this magazine is incredible. It's a horror entertainment magazine. They do some of the most fantastic interviews with very notable people in various horror movies, screen queens. You get everything. Everything you want is in this magazine, and it's the UK's longest running magazine. And I enjoy it. Every time it comes out, I got it in my hands. I'm reading it. I'm enjoying it. It brings back old memories of some of the best horror movies out there. And since we got Brian on the show here, I mean, Alan on the show here, Alan, how did this magazine get started?
Well, in the UK, we've never had a good record for horror magazines. In fact, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and of course, I was originally reading Famous Monsters of Film Lab, but only when I could find it in the shops, which wasn't very often. And what you got to remember is that all those old Frankenstein films that might seem very, very cozy now, but they were all X certificates in the UK. So we couldn't get kids, up until you were 16, you couldn't get in to see them, which was crazy, really, because they're not that terrifying, we were always very jealous of Americans being able to get in to see these movies and them being shown on television. But certainly, there was one short-lived magazine called Supernatural, I think came out in '69, and it was the first UK horror mag I've ever seen. Very excited about it. Later on, I found out that the publisher absconded with all the funds from the editor. Told me that, so it only lasted 2 issues, and then after that, there were a few over the years. But when Darkside started, it was because a publisher friend of mine had just moved to a new publishing house, and the old publishing house that he was working for, they created a magazine called Skeleton Crew, which was a horror magazine, and so he, kind of out of an act of spite, said, "You can do a horror magazine for us," which became The Dark Side. And I gotta say, I didn't choose the name The Dark Side because do you remember that series, the George Romero, the George Romero Tales from the Dark Side? I always felt that was too much like that. I was going to call it, I don't know, Scream, probably, actually, but someone else took that title later on.
Oh yeah.
I was going to call it something. I was going to call it something different, but I thought Dark Side's okay. And then when it came to things like the logo, the guy who designed the magazine was he drew it. He drew the logo, and we liked it. And it's my first magazine I ever edited. And remember, in those days, it was such a process. And I don't know those of you work in publishing nowadays, but now it's just, the first thing they do, they sent me a font book with all the fonts. They said, "What font do you want your text in?" And then everything had to be typed. So nobody was, it wasn't done on the computer. So all the editing had to be scribbled in the margins, and then it had to be typed out again, come back. And then it was such an arduous process in those days. And we were only allowed to have so many pages of color. So the first issue of Darkside went on sale in 1990. And we had a big launch party at the London Dungeon over here. And by that time, there were a lot of people I knew in the horror scene. I was very good friends with Clive Barker, Ingrid Pitt, Caroline Munro, David Warbeck, a lot of the people who were kind of in quite well. David McGillivray, who has always been a good friend, who wrote a lot of the Frightmare and stuff like that. And we went out, but the magazine only lasted a year because we were in this big building. The publishers were Maxwell Specialist Publications. Now, Robert Maxwell, I don't know if you know of his history, but you know of his daughter Ghislaine. She's not very well thought of either. He's absconded with a lot of pension funds and was found dead. He fell off his yacht or something. Someone pushed him. I'm not sure. And so at that point, the company closed, and they told me they'd lost £100,000 on Darkside in a year. And I said, "How can you lose that amount of money on a magazine?" They said, "Well, there's the rent of the building, there's the cleaners, and what I mean." And I thought, and so I said to the guy who used to do the repro on it, which is the guy who created all the film to make the thing up. he and I were good pals by then. And I said, why don't we just buy it and do it ourselves? And so that's actually how the magazine happened. And I think one of the main reasons we've survived so long is because we are not a big business enterprise. You know, we are a cottage industry. We do it all from home, and I have a lot of freelance friends who do it. And also, doing it myself, we were approached not so long ago by a big company that wanted to buy our magazine over here, and we said no because I said next issue we've got like Todd Slaughter on the cover. They didn't know who Todd Slaughter was, but you know we do because we like those kind of things. And so and I remember I said, what will happen is you'll be asking us to put the latest Scream film on the cover or the latest Final Destination film on the cover because you're selling advertising concerned with it. And so I said, the only reason we do what we do so well is because we know we don't appeal to a huge number of people. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But the horror scene is it's not that big, is it? Even worldwide. I mean, look, David Colton does an amazing job with the Monster Kid Forum. Lovely guy. But I think they've got about 7,000 or 8,000 members. I'm not sure how many they've got. But yeah, in the scheme of things, you think how many people go to the cinema every year. I mean, I go to my local magazine shop, and there's about 15 magazines about steam trains or fishing or golf. But there are not 15 magazines about horror. Because although we who like it, who love it, you know, want to read about the stuff that we really like, it's not a massive break. No big publisher could do something like this and keep it going for 35 years, you know, like we have, really.
Well, I saw that I saw somewhere where you feel that part of your also longevity is not skimping on the product, you know, keeping your covers glossy, making the magazine worth, you know, the buy. I also saw where you became the full-time editor in 1993. Was it? I mean, I know you were editing before that, but
no, I started editing Dark Side in 1990, and that was I was working up until then. I was working at Waitrose, which is a supermarket chain over here, and I was a manager in the shops there. So I kind of met normal people. Do you know what I mean? I've got some writers on my team who have done nothing but write since they left university, and they are good writers. They're good writers, but I always kind of feel one of my big advantages is having been out in the world, meeting people, chatting to them, and you know, not sort of, you know, I have a different outlook on life than a lot of full-time writers, you know. So I was part-time writer. But I was writing for everybody, and mainly I was writing for adult magazines like Penthouse and things like that. I had columns in that. When I was working at Waitrose, I once had to take a day off to go and interview Sylvia Christel and Emmanuel, and I interviewed her and wrote it up, you know, very shortly. And they when I sent it in, the Penthouse paid me £500 for it. Now I wasn't even earning that in a month at Waitrose at the time. I thought I'm definitely in the wrong business. I need to go different. But you're right what you say about when I was running Dark Side with my partner Ken, who sadly passed on. What he would do, and it really used to frustrate me, was if he didn't sell so many adverts one month, he would, and once or twice took the gloss off the cover, or gave it more black and white pages. And I got so frustrated. I said, yeah, you can't, if you're going to do stuff, you need to, you know, you have to give people, and I always feel that's true, really good value for money. And what's so annoying for me at the moment, and it has been for many, many years, is how much it actually costs to get. I'd love to give Americans, you know, European, Canadian, Australian readers the same magazine that people can buy for £4.99 over here, which is, you know, about $6-7, you know, something like that. But it's so possible because of the ridiculous postage that it costs to get the magazine out to the States. And therefore, you know, even we try our hardest, and it got to a stage where it was costing us £9 to send a magazine to America. Yeah. So we found a slightly cheaper courier, which takes a little bit longer, but we couldn't carry on. I actually worked out, my wife and I who's my partner, we sat down one night and we worked out that it was costing if we sold a subscription to Australia, we were making £5 a year profit from sending
Wow.
12 issues, which is not a business thing. Is it?
You could just sell a couple thousand books over there and not even worry about America and pay your bills, huh?
I know. Well, I know. And but then I've just had an order tonight. I've been boxing it up from some guy in, I think it's in Germany actually. And he wants us to send him 3 of each of our books, because he says they sell really well. So I boxed him up, send him over there. He doesn't mind paying the postage.
Nice.
I mean, there are cheaper ways of getting these things over there. But I will say this. I can show you this actually while you're here. It's not a. If I show you something slightly rude, it's not going to get you off the air in your podcast.
No.
No.
We're good.
Heck no. Are you kidding? We would have been off.
Right. So this is our book. We just published this, The Best of Susie. Okay, this is Rick Melton, cover artist. Okay,
Nice.
And it's a massive, great book. It's really heavy, and it's got all kinds. As Hazel Court, I think it's got all kinds of art in it. Some of it a bit rude.
Wow.
What does it cost to print one?
That's glossy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
glossy.
that's Rick, my artist Rick. But it costs. Well, this to be quite transparent. If we post, I have to charge £35. We charge in the UK for that, and we only printed 500 of them. But in America, if send it to America, I have to charge £60, because it's about that amount. It's about £25 to post it over there.
Yeah.
And I'm charging 65 for Australia. I don't really like to do it, but otherwise, we are a proper business. And it's probably worth it for people, because I think once it is definitely worth it. I think the best book we did recently was something called The Amazing Movie Posters of Thailand, and one of the guys, Phil, was an American author, and part of his deal was part of his payment was that we sent him a bunch of his books, and he actually came back to us and bought a load of his own. I know it sounds bad, but he sold them to over in America, and that book is sold out, and long sold out. I mean, we sold out in about 3 months or something. So it's you just don't know what to do. How many books? I mean, we just did a George Romero book as well, and we're doing. Funnily enough, there was a book I did in 1998 called Video Nasties. I don't know. You aware of the Video Nasties thing over here? Do you know all of that?
We've done a lot of books, man.
We've got tons of them. Yeah. Video Nasties.
The video nasty is a British term for is that anything from porno to like a snuff film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I had this genius idea back in the day to do a book which had all the old video covers in it. So, for example, I might have a copy here, actually. Oh, yeah, I've got a copy here. Look. So this is the book. This is only, so it's like landscape, because every cover in it is cover for
front and back.
Wow, look at that.
Awesome.
They got all the films that got into the into the nasties.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And so I did this. Don't go in the house and things like that. Don't go near the park. Faces of Death. Yeah.
Nice.
So all those were nasty, and that sold out quite quickly. And we did a reprint, and that sold out as well. And I was looking online the other day, and someone was trying to sell a copy on Amazon for like £240. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to reprint that. So we should
reprint that right now.
Yeah, stop that now. And I mean, the whole thing about magazines, I love all the horror magazines. There's no, it's still the same. Even those old, I don't know.
Bangora.
You guys are all.
Yeah, Bangora's going down though, right? They're going down. Most of them are not lasting like you guys are, right?
Well, the thing is, right, we had this argument. Well, it's not exactly the argument. There was a magazine called Scream over here.
Scream,
because mainly we get on well with people in the UK, but I don't really know the people who do Scream. They don't really. They're not my pals, but my pals are more like the people who do with people long dead. They don't really they don't mingle in the
right.
We all go out together and have good times. We do this thing called the Gentlemen of Horror meeting once a a month or so, where we go to London and we go out and have a good time, and usually with the people from from We Belong Dead and all these other things, and
Carolyn Monroe.
yeah. Carolyn Monroe is a part of our scene, definitely, and Maddie Smith, definitely. She goes to everything.
Right.
So we do that. But this other magazine called Scream, my designer Kevin, he got an phoned me up one day, said, this magazine Scream, but we are the world's #1 horror magazine on their cover. And so I said, okay, we're the world's #1 best-selling horror magazine. And the reason they can't argue with it is that they only come out like half dozen times a year. So
you got to buy you got to buy monthly, right? Like you got like 660 issues or something. You got crazy.
We used to do 13 issues a year, and then the print costs went through the roof for a while. So we're sticking at 12. But don't forget, we also do Infinity as well, which is the sci-fi mag.
That's right.
Other one, yeah. So that now is outselling Darkside in the UK, which I'm still
crazy.
I was quite happy about it, really, because if it sells, it sells. But and I think it trades on the same thing, like nostalgia. You know what I mean? Like, as I say, I reckon you guys are all too young to remember way back when these films first came out. But I'm saying, I'm doing this book later this year about my 1968 diaries, which is me growing up and when I saw those films. Because I remember I went to see films like, there was one week in the UK, Devil Rides Out opened one week, and then the following week, Lost Continent. And these are the old Hammer classics when they were making really good. And so see.
By the way, was Jerry? What's it, Jerry? What your favorite music producer, Goldstein? Was he? Did he have
Jerry Goldsmith? Yeah. Jerry.
Yeah.
I remember I sort of blagged my way into interviewing him. I was just sometimes you can just get anywhere just by calling people up and going, yeah, and they're quite interested. And I was a big fan of his. I just remember when I first interviewed him, he was recording a film called Outland, a Sean Connery film.
Wow.
And I remember the head of the London Symphony Orchestra, or whoever it was there, he came past the table and he said, don't interview him, he's not famous. And they were taking the mickey. And scary. I was funny because with my girlfriend at the time, who became my first wife rather, and she knew I was a bit obsessed with Jerry Goldsmith, and I started correcting him on stuff. And he was with this guy, Arthur Morton, lovely old Jewish guy who was his arranger for most of his life. And he started talking about a film he did called Binary by Michael Crichton. And then I said, you mean Pursuit? And he went, no, it's called Binary. And then Arthur Morton said, no, Jerry, it was called Pursuit, And then he said, I'm getting a bit scared now, he says, because I knew so much about his stuff, I was a big fan. I still am, yeah, obviously.
Hey, Allan, I gotta ask you something real quick.
Yeah.
Let's say if I wanted Dark Side magazine #1, do you have these magazines archived and digitized?
Do you know something? I'll look into it for you because you kept our letters pages going for a long, long time. People, I've got to say this, right? Paul just been sending me these letters, and I publish all of them because I do like his stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people think, they're making those up. They're making those up because it's all the same. And in fact, you'll find, I think it's either in the latest issue or the next one, somebody's written me this humongously long letter and said, at least it'll make a change from that guy who writes to you about his paranormal activities or something like that. And so I'll definitely share this podcast to prove that you actually do exist and stuff. Because I'm as much interested in what you're doing, your paranormal stuff, and also this podcast. I love going on podcasts; they're good fun, and get to meet some nice people. I like rabbiting on anyway, so it's not a problem for me. But certainly with Darkside, the interesting thing about Darkside, I never saw myself doing a horror magazine. I couldn't see it. And I remember just after I started doing it, one of the people who came to the launch party at the London Dungeon was Alan Jones. I don't know if you know Alan Jones, but Alan Jones has written lots of horror books, and he also is one of the people behind Fright Fest, which is one of the big events in the UK.
Yeah.
And I remember I was out with him, and this girl who became a good friend of mine. And when he first introduced her to me, he said, you'll like her because she's like a female version of me. And I said, well, how could I like her then? That's a ridiculous thing to say. But it was there's a girl called Maitland McDonough who's long been a friend of mine. Wrote some great books on. We got great friends, and we were out one night, and Alan said to me, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Well, I don't know why." He said, "Why are you doing this horror magazine? It's a ridiculous idea." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, none of them succeed." And then about 10 minutes later, I find out he's doing this magazine called Shivers, which he's editing that. And I said, well, you're doing that. That didn't last for too long with him, but the company went bust anyway. But I do find, I do love, and one of my favorite mags was Video Watchdog, which I used to.
Oh yeah, Watchdog. I remember.
Yeah, Video Watchdog, which is an excellent magazine. And I was very sad when that one, failed. Failed. But you're saying about Fangoria. I mean, the thing about Fangoria, we don't see it over here at all in the shops or anything. And I understand it comes out about 4 times a year, and it's kind of, it covers more modern stuff, which we don't tend to do so much of. We don't. Somebody the other day, not the other day, a few months back, one of my regular writers wanted me to run a piece with an interview with Lee Whannell on The Wolfman, and I knew I was going to regret it, because I said, "What if the film turns out to be absolute rubbish?" And it did. But that's the problem with modern day stuff. I really like to cover obscure things that people. I'm not going to turn down, like, this is a really big modern day thing. We'll probably do something on it, but we don't really get offered that anyway, to be honest. And you know what? Somebody was saying to me the other day, and I don't know about how you feel about this, but if you get an interview with a modern day filmmaker or a modern day star, they're so boring, because they're just going to say, "Oh, it was fantastic working with so and so. It's going to be a brilliant film. It's going to be this, that, and the other." You get some old stager who's got nothing to lose, and they're just going to dish the dirt on
the real, yeah.
Don't you think it's much more interesting to read, isn't it? Really, that's what.
But I wanted to ask you, Alan, when I was reading about you, I know that you work with like Carpenter, right? I know you had a book you did based on Carpenter. I know you've interviewed Robert Englund. You said he was a real nice guy.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, with all the tools they have for AI, like emergent stuff you could just speak into, I think you probably are right for a really new good horror movie or genre or something. I mean, come up with something new, man. I mean, we need it, because they just don't. Every week you see all these different dramas come out, and these terms of endearments, and these Disney movies and crap. I need to see some horror, man. I mean, not since the days of with the Lon Chaney, Boris Karloff, Peter Cush, Peter Lee, all those guys, like when they had a bunch of movies that could come from different stars. We don't have that anymore. So it's just like they think of a concept, they put the movie out, and then you get one movie, like every month or 2 months. I don't even think we get a horror movie every 2 months.
With the magazine, though, it makes a good format for a TV show. I can see Dark Side actually becoming a TV series, going back and talking about these horror movies.
Yeah, I could do that.
1950s, 1960s.
I agree with you. Yeah,
a lot of memories.
I agree with you, and I think it's an interesting one, this, because I had a friend of mine around yesterday, and he said he was out with his son, and he goes, my son said to me, he saw a really good horror movie. He was recommending it. He said it's really good, and I went,
which one?
I went, what's it called? And he goes, I can't remember. And I said, it was out of cinemas, though, was it? And then, what would you say if someone said, what was a really good horror movie? Well, one we all liked. See, for example, a lot of people like this film, Longlegs. I didn't think much of it.
Oh, it was a piece of shit.
But we all said, well, we all like The Substance, and that was the film we was talking about, which I think was pretty good,
Yeah, people
but if you think about we're all quite looking forward to seeing 28 years later, I suppose.
My God, I can't wait!
It's going to be good. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I've been saving it. Actually, I was gonna think the day it came out. No, I didn't.
It's more than a horror movie. Ray Fiennes plays a very interesting character. I mean, if you want a horror movie that's going to make you cry, you know, and bring in some emotional substance to it, it's more than a horror movie. I did like it, but it wasn't your typical zombie movie. Is all I can say. Don't go
Was
in
it
there.
Chases?
What's that?
Phil, was it Chases? I mean, you know, the thing I like
Yeah,
fast zombies.
they were fast zombies. They were chases. They had good characters, good character
Okay,
development.
okay.
All in all, I give it. It was a good film. It was
Okay.
more than I was expecting from a zombie film. I liked the mixing of the old footage they used. For example, the old Richard III film that they were using the beginnings of that, and you know, because it takes place in the Scottish Highlands.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm a film buff anyway. I've done documentaries and things like that, and I love archival footage. And they used a lot of that to great effect.
Mhm.
It was a very good film, and Ray Fiennes is a really interesting character that he plays in it. It's not your typical let's just kill zombies movie. I'll put it that way.
Okay,
It's,
okay.
I miss the old drive-in theater movies. I watched Humanoids from the Deep again the other night.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
and I know that's garbage, but I like garbage when it comes to horror movies.
That's
You
the
know,
thing.
From the Black Lagoon. I
well,
mean,
even
right
Creature
now,
from the Black Lagoon is kind of like lightweight. You get the humanoids from the deep. There's a humanoid from the deep raping a girl on the beach,
Yeah,
and at the end, the baby comes out because it was an obvious ripoff.
oh yeah, okay.
And, I mean, I like the drive-in theater culture of
Wicker
schlock,
Man.
of crap movies.
Well, I think you're right.
Rosemary's Baby.
Oh,
The
well,
Wicker
Roger,
Man.
Well, that's highbrow. That's really hot.
Abby went in the black community. They had Abby, which is kind of a copy of Abby, but it's kind of copy JD's Revenge, which is kind of like they try to do the Exorcist in a pimp way.
I'm gonna pass it back to the guest now.
No. The other one we all liked, because often I go with my daughter and my wife, and we all liked Sinners as well. We thought that was very good.
Yeah, you like Sinners? What did you think? You thought you liked it? Huh? Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was great, and I liked it because of the music, which was brilliant, and the whole vibe of it, and it was just a really good film.
Yeah, see, for me as a blues artist, like it had a lot of many plus. Cause see, I started doing the blues because it was a music that everybody kind of borrowed from, but nobody really, like not since Thriller's gone have we even had really a commercial blues record on the radio that you could really think of, So like in the hip hop community and the R&B, I was like, let me do some contemporary blues. But when I saw in Sinners, you get reminded of the theme of so many musicians who have just like they put their hopes and dreams into it. And to be honest, that industry never was going to be good for them. I mean, the getting high, the things you got to do to really pay the price you pay for fame, it wasn't going to really work out like they thought. And, there's a lot of broken souls along the way, man. So that blues, but a lot of people talk about when I'm at the club, I tell them, I say, look, people say they don't know about blues, they don't like the blues. I say, listen, when you can't pay your car note, I said, when you can't pay your house note, when you can't pay that stamp for no, you damn sure got the blues, right? They go, what? I tell them, well, the drinks is cold, the people is hot, let's hit it. So, when I saw Sinners, man, the club scene and all that, man, that's how it is, man. You see people, you come there, I might see a guy getting drinks and it's a blonde girl over there and he's looking at her. And when the song gets going, I put them both together and they start dancing and he'll go like this, So it's like, the blues is where it's at, but also the history. And then the vampires that they had in there, that the way they did that could have went to any other type of creatures too. The way they played it, you didn't actually know that it was going to be vampires at first. For people that don't know about, can I come in and asking, having permission to come in.
They got that from Bram Stoker's Dracula, where a vampire has to be invited in.
Or Lost Boys. Or any vampire movie that's used that reference.
What did you think of 30 Days and Nights? Everybody feel
awesome.
What did you think 30 Days and Nights? That was one of my favorite.
That was great. But listen, I've got this theory. Okay. Well, no, it's more than the theory. I do know it to be true, and that is that when you're of a certain age, the music you hear and the films you see are lodged in there. It's usually when you're about 14, 15 or something like that. I suppose why I've done my diary book. So I'm. Because that was the year I saw films like Barbarella and The Graduate and all that, And,
68, 68.
68
Hey,
was,
A
yeah.
Boy and His Dog. I used to love that movie.
That's another great
yeah.
one.
Would you like 14, huh? Would you like 14, 15?
Yeah, 50, 40 and 15. Yeah. So looking back on that now, and also so Girl on a Motorcycle with Marianne Faithfull. So I knew where my, preferences lay at that time. But it was, but and certainly a lot of in this country anyway, a lot of people, because I told you that you couldn't get into the X films in those days. I couldn't get in. I remember being nearly able to get in to see Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, but they turned me away finally. And I was almost glad. I've done it. I find it too scary. But now it's a PG on Blu-ray over here, so not that scary really. And when you see those films, sometimes you see something as a kid, and you find it really creepy, and then you watch it years later, and you think, what on earth was I thinking about when I'm scared by this, or got sleepless night out of it? And but I do like, but you still like the nostalgia thing, and it's like sometimes I have this sort of big thing about comfort films that you watch sometimes when they don't need to be horror, but sometimes you think when the world's getting a little bit complicated, you might settle down with a favorite bit of music or a favorite film or something like that gives you a little bit of grounding and recenters you in the world. And I think a lot of people, the reason my other magazine Infinity is so successful is because we do stuff on old comics and old TV shows and stuff like that. Some guy sent me a thing recently which was all about his set visits to CSI and all those cop shows back in the day, and it's very American in the flavor of it, but it's very interesting that he got to meet all these people who were working on these shows and what his feelings were about that. So I do like it to be, what we do. I like it to be quite opinionated, and I think also, I don't know because I haven't read Fangoria for a while, but we are quite British in flavor with our magazine, and particularly my editorials, which I tend to just make. I'll write about all sorts in my editorials, and but it's sharing things. And I got that from my good friend Richard Clemenson, who does Little Shop of Horrors in America. And I remember when I was in the early 70s, I used to get this magazine in London, and it was not readily available, and it used to come out very sporadically, like it still does now. But he would write in there about all his personal problems with his relationship with his wife and things like that. And I couldn't wait till the next issue. It was like the soap opera. You know what I mean? What is he still with her? Has she gone off, or is it? I don't know. But I did like the personal touch, that you can share with people, because if you're, that's why editorials in magazines, and particularly in America, a lot of people at one point said, what are all these editorials about? They're not about what's in the magazine. And I say, well, if you want to know what's in the magazine, it's on the right-hand side on the contents page. Just look down there. Because too many magazines, to my mind, don't have that personal touch where they kind of try and draw you into to be involved. Like our letters, like when we, the people who write our letters, we get some really weird letters. I'm not talking about your ones. Don't worry. But I'm just saying we do get some odd ones, but we publish them as they are, and I just love it. When we can. I mean, not many people actually write in and say, "Oh, well, we think your magazine's rubbish." But if we did, then we would. I've had some complaints because people have complained that maybe we might be a little bit non-politically correct in this day and age. So I've had a few of those, but I still publish them because I'm not.
Hey, Allan, we have about 2 minutes left. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Phil, our tech guy, is going to send us a link so we can finish up the interview.
Because that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to stay as long as you want me to, so it's not a problem.
Yeah, okay. We'll have a second half. I had a question that I wanted to ask you about the age of your subscriber, the average age of your subscriber, if you had any way of knowing that, and if that's changed over the years, especially now in the digital age. I find the younger generation, my son's generation, trying to hand them a book is like trying to hand throwing holy water at a vampire. It's, God forbid they would turn a page on something.
And Helen, I'll answer that for you. I'm 70 years older, Phil.
He's got 20 years on.
Sorry, how old are you?
I'm 70 years old.
Well, I've got I've got the advantage of you. I'm 72.
Whoa. You don't look it. Holy cow.
Clean living vampire.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
You look good, Allan. Jeez.
So I didn't start working on Dark Side till I was about 36, I guess. Yeah, when we started doing it. Yeah. But it's no, it's what you say is true. When we did because we can talk about this as well, but when we do a thing called Dark Fest every year, which is our Dark Festival, and when we did our first one, my wife Yanni said to me, "They're going to be a load of old fogies going to go along to it because she's going, they're all going to be," and we certainly do get some. Sadly, we get some letters from the widows of subscribers saying, "Don't send any more copies." So we've had that, and we know a lot of people say that they're quite old, and some in their 80s who buy our magazine. But when we did our festival, we realized that it was most of the people there were kind of like 30s, 40s.
Yeah, man. I read, and I was asking you before we went off, what sign are you?
Aries.
March or April?
April. Yeah.
Wow.
And my second wife is Aries as well, and we are very similar in our attitudes. And yeah.
Wow. Aries, I can deal with that. I love Aries, man, all day. My uncle, my favorite uncle, he was on the 10th.
Right.
Hey, Allan.
We're recording right now, right?
Oh
Yes.
We are. We're back in business.
Okay.
Allan, I was going to ask you, who are some of the team of writers that you have for your magazine? You have some good writers.
Well, it's the Field of Dreams thing, okay? Because particularly with Infinity. So my wife said to me, "Why don't we do another magazine?" And I said, "Well, yeah, okay." I don't know as much about science fiction as I do about horror, but I know a fair bit. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll just see how far we can get into this, because we did do Infinity before back in the day with my partner, and he closed it after about 5 issues because he wasn't making enough money. And in this instance, I thought, I don't know how long I'm going to go on with this. But then suddenly, all these great writers who'd been they'd been working for magazines. It's like there are people I've got like Mark Phillips. Mark Phillips is a good example. Worked on Starlog, and a lot of these people worked on Starlog a long time ago. Fangoria's sci-fi version. And they came to me and said, would you be interested in something on, and no matter how obscure, in fact, the more obscure it was, the better. So there's a kind of, I've never met him, but there's a guy called Greg Coulon who knows a lot about Willis O'Brien and people like that. He's coming up to London this year. We're going to meet up at last. And he said, he would put stuff to me that was so obscure. And he said to me, have you ever seen Skullduggery, the Burt Reynolds film? And I said, yeah. And he said, that'd be a good feature, wouldn't it? Now, most people would say no, because not many people have seen that film.
Another area.
Yeah. But it's like the Colossus the Forbin project, which is another favorite of mine from back in the day. And he chucks his names at me, and I go, yeah, that would be good. That'd be really good. And so it is with my general writers. Kim Newman is very popular. I've known Kim for a long time. And so he does a column. He's quite a big journalist over here, and I just let him write about what he wants to write about. So that's what he does. But a lot of these people are friends of mine going way back. And yes, of course, I also do accept stuff from writers who've not had things published, because I know, and this is very true, this is my own entry into the world of journalism, was I was working at Waitrose, and I'd just come back from a 6-month holiday around the country, and I started working back at Waitrose, and my girlfriend at the time, well, she became my girlfriend when I came back to work at Waitrose. She introduced me to her dad and said, "Oh, well, he's been off work for 6 months and traveling around the country," and he wasn't impressed by that. And then it was a case of Oh yes, but he may be working as a fruit and vegetables manager or wherever it was at the time. But he's really a writer, and he said, "Yeah, sure, that's that, yeah, sure, that's true." And one day I went round to her house, and she had this little thing called a petite typewriter. It's a little girly typewriter they used to have, little plastic ones used to type on. And why don't you write something? So I wrote something for about my collecting 8mm horror films. So I used to collect these little short versions, cut down versions of horror films, and I sent it to House of Hammer magazine, and they published it, and they paid me like £75, which is quite a lot of money back in the day. And then I got the flavour of it, if you like. I got the bug, and I started sending everybody stuff, and I started getting everything published, and people were publishing it all over the place. And I suddenly started to realise that that was how I got into things. But if somebody had if Des Skin, who's now a good friend of mine, who's publisher of House of Hammer, I always credit him, because if he hadn't said, "I'll publish this," I probably would have just worked at Waitrose for the whole of my life. You know, that I would have thought, there's no money in this, I'm not very good at it, and I would have given up. And so therefore, I always feel that when I get stuff in from people, I would always look at it, because I think there might, and I found some really good writers who are probably not full-time writers, but they are good at it, just need the break to. But the trouble is, and I feel guilty, really, because we pay every writer who writes for us £100 for a feature. And these are great writers, some of them. Kim Newman can earn a lot more than that elsewhere. John Hamilton, who's a great friend of mine, I'll say he'll give me 6,000-7,000 word feature for £100. And I feel guilty. I've had people come along and say, "Well, we won't write for you, and unless you pay. How much do you pay per 1,000 words?" And I go, "Look, sorry, that's what we pay. Well, we don't. At least we pay. It's not a case of we are something." And a lot of magazines don't pay a bean, for their writers nowadays, because they do this thing which I hate. They go, "Oh, you need, it will give you the exposure," but no, that's not good enough, really. And to be honest, I am very grateful a lot of my writers write for me for that rate, because it's not a very good rate. I mean, I was like I say, I was being paid £75 back in 1979. So if you do the maths on that, but there is also a different world nowadays, because when I actually went on to edit Penthouse magazine for some years, in the
Right on.
And when I did that, because I worked on a lot of adult magazines, that's a different line, but that's probably how I made most of my money, to be honest. But when I was working on Penthouse, they were selling 500,000 copies a month, and when they closed, they were selling about 5,000 copies a month, because the internet had come along. People didn't want to pay for that kind of stuff, and so the magazine industry is, we're no magazines sell vast amounts anymore, and that's all there is to it. But you have to do we sell enough to make a profit every month, so we're happy with that. But it's very difficult, and it's a tough thing. But I don't know about you, but I do like to have a proper magazine to hold, and I don't really like to just have something extra. I mean, it's the same thing, but yeah.
Allan, oh, I'm sorry, Zendy. Allan, I know what you mean by not getting paid a bean, because I work for 3 paranormal magazines, and I work for Costa Rica Times. And my articles, I don't get paid for it. I just get a lot of exposure, which is cool. But I used to also too work for 3 comic book magazines when I was in the comic book industry. And those magazines actually paid me for my articles. But my paranormal articles, I get a lot of exposure. I get people writing me stuff and everything else, which is cool. But I don't get paid for any of my articles for those paranormal magazines.
That's why I think that a lot of my writers a certain number of them are my kind of age, and they just enjoy writing. I mean, and I mean, John Hamilton is one of my favorite writers. He writes. He was saying to me the other day he's writing a 20,000 word piece on The Damned for Little Shop of Horrors, and he probably won't get any paid for that at all. But he's doing it because he enjoys it. And I've done the same thing. I get into trouble with my wife actually because when one of our good friends, Dennis Bickle, who's sadly no longer with us, he had a company called Hemlock Books, and they published a thing called Fantastic 50s and Sensational 60s, and he would just say to me, "Can you write an article for me for this?" And I'd go, "Yeah, what is it?" And usually because I write quite quickly, I'd just send it to him, and he would pay me like £40 for it. And then now in the later incarnation after Dennis died, they asked me to write for it, and they don't pay me anything, but I still go, yeah, okay, it's because it's just the job, if you enjoy doing it, and they might ask me to do articles on things. I had a classic example where the guy who runs the magazine said to me, I'm sure, I don't know if I'm going to do that or not, but he said to me, can you do something? We're doing a 60s issue. Can you do something on the Warlord? I really like that film, Charlton Heston. So I said, yeah, I'll do the Warlord. I love that. Anyway, I did it literally over the next few hours and sent it in straight away. And he said, that you don't need to give it to me for 3 months. Then he looked at it and he went, oh, sorry, I meant The War Lover with Steve McQueen. And I went, oh my God. So that's a totally different film. But I still did the other one for him. And he hasn't used the Warlord yet. But I didn't get paid for it. I just think to myself, well, what else am I going to do? If I'm sitting around, I do like a bit of writing and, like to go and do stuff. And I think what I love about, and it's a shame you guys aren't over. If you ever get over here, you must join us for one of our little get-togethers. Because believe me, we have a really good time. We go out for a drink and a curry usually, and we're doing and even when we get people over, we have some great times. But we've had some good guests over to because I've started doing this Dark Fest. It's really, really popular. It is, and the cinema we have is being voted the best London cinema 2 or 3 years running. It's really, really good. It's very old-fashioned, independent. We take over the upper level of it and the bar and the kitchen. And we've had people over and they're quite dubious. I remember we had one year I had over Ruggiero Diodato and Zora Karova. You know who she is? She's the girl who gets hung up by her boobs in Cannibal Ferox or whatever.
Oh, really?
So we had her over. She couldn't speak much English, and she got a bit annoyed with me when I picked her up from the airport because she was wearing a face mask because it was COVID time, and she said to me, "Don't you wear face masks over here?" I said, "No, we're made of sterner stuff."
You're mad as that. You get a lot of ladies to that Dark Fest. You get out. I mean, with Carolyn,
it's all ladies, isn't it? Yeah, so we get.
You get the hammers, right? The hammers. Yeah. What did you call them? I heard you call them the hammers.
Hammer ladies. Yeah, we have a glamour. So we got all the hammer ladies. This year we're bringing over Lynn Lowry, who was in Shivers and stuff like that. But I remember one year we had Linnea Quigley over. And she was very dubious at first, I think, but she made a lot of money. She did really, really well, and she joined us for our curry night and everything. So she was good. And
wow.
So this year we've got Sherry Buchanan as well coming over. I bet you don't comment. Anyone of you know who Sherry Buchanan is?
I don't. Not mortal fans.
To be a specialist on this subject. Have you ever seen Zombie Holocaust?
I've
seen every zombie movie it is.
Well, yeah. She's in that. She's one of the main stars of that.
I'll go back and check it out again just to look at her.
And she's American though. She's from Mississippi or something like that.
Hey, Alan, I've seen some real life horror over at London, England. I went on the Jack the Ripper tour, and I seen the Tower of London, which they did a lot of torture, murder, and suicide. They're very, very haunted place.
Well, that's endorsed by the Royals, so that's fine. You can get away.
Well, Alan, what you said about the glossy covers. I looked at I used to look at a lot of anime, like some guys do, and I look at the magazines. So they have the Korean ones, manhwa. They have the Chinese, and then they have the Japanese. But they have this one, a Korean manhwa, where the covers, and the pictures were colored and glossy from cover to cover. And I thought, wow, maybe they're just coming out with their premiere issue, but it was really good. It was some vampires that were regulated by this one entity called a noblesse, and he was more powerful than all of them. And the way they had him dressed and the colors and everything, it caught my attention right away. And they did it every issue like that. And so I was wondering, how could they afford to do it? But they would say, like in most of those animes, hey, we need sponsors of that anybody can draw and this type of thing. They would advertise a little bit for that. But I noticed, I was going to say to you, I noticed when they tried to do the anime, when they finally got to that point, because a lot of people said, hey, can we see this as an anime, an actual cartoon or whatever? It was hard to translate the script, and because you're not captivated by the gloss of the characters in the page anymore. The colors are bright on TV, so I don't know how you make that translation a lot of times. What do you think?
Well, I think if you're doing I mean, we've never ever gone down, reduced the quality of the magazine. But if you've ever seen, so here's the thing, right? That these magazines that Hemlock Books do, Sensational 60s and Fantastic 50s and things like that, they are glossier than the Dark Side, and they look amazing. But the problem is when Dennis, when he was still alive, he was the man behind it, and he wanted to see if he could get it out in the shops. And I said, yeah, but you're charging £10 an issue for your magazine. You can't do that. It's simple equations, how much it costs. Every paper's quality size you go up, it's going to cost you more money. And in the end, you've got to make a profit, and that's all there is to it. It costs enough to print these magazines in the first place. And, for those who don't, this is something that might be of interest to your listeners, is this, that I never realized it till I started getting into publishing the magazine myself. And the only reason I got into publishing it, my partner died, and I remarried, and that's not because he wasn't my partner, so let's not get down that route. No, he basically what happened was he died, and my wife ran off with the next door neighbor. That's a whole new story, but we won't go into that on here. So I met Yanni, my now my wife, been my wife for a while, and she wanted me. She said, "Why don't we start your magazine up again?" So she basically bought it back from my partner's widow, and she basically paid for the initial issues to be republished. So she's really the person who's behind all of that, doing it. And at the time, what we didn't realize is that in this country, there's a big newsagent chain called WH Smith's, and we have to buy our way in there. I mean, buy our way in there. So we pay on average about £40,000 a year to be on their shelves. That's what we pay. Wow. And in America, we're in Barnes and Noble and places like that. But in America, what's happened since COVID, which has been really frustrating for us and annoying, and unfortunately we have to live with it, is that before COVID, we used to just send magazines over to America, and they used to get sent around. Then now they say, right, we're going to charge you 50% per magazine for every one we ship. So we're paying thousands in America, or just to get them out to Barnes and Noble and places like that. So these are the things you face as a publisher, which is enough to put anyone off doing this stuff, because without this, we'd be making many thousands more per year. But it's one of those things that you have to put up with, and it's what a lot of my friends were talking about, the collapse of diamond publishers, or whatever they're called, people who distributors rather, who do a lot of comics over there. And so all these things are working against people who publish magazines to get them in the hands of people in another country, or in their own country. And it's so tough. So so all the time when paper prices went up, we used to have the publishers saying, well, we can do the same price if you go down so many GSM in the papers. And I'd say no, because that, to me, if I was buying that mag in the shops, I'd go in there and go, well, what's gone wrong with this? It's looking cheaper. And I'd see that as something on the way out. I'd go, that's on the way out.
And that's that same problem about shipping out the magazines to different places, different countries. With the comic book, when I was in the comic book industry, the same problem with getting the comic books out to Australia, England, and everywhere else. So, and also too, just to let you know, Alan, my closest call to writing something in the horror field, um, I I I used to write a little bit, well, some of the stories to Hellboy for Mike Mignola.
Wow.
And so the comic books, but not the movie, but the comic books. Yeah.
Well, that's a good claim to fame. That's very good.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's cool. That's cool.
But I think the thing is, yeah, we all going back to what I was saying, I always look at stuff from people, and no matter who it may be, because and sometimes, I see something comes through, and I think, well, it might need a little bit of work, but to encourage people, I think everybody, because I got in this way, I just think, because I've got no qualifications, I left school with no qualifications, I mean, that's it. I was just about able to work in a shop. So I think, you can do it if you've got the talent, but also it's more than just a talent. It's just a luck, because if you've been in the right place at the right time. My daughter's a very good writer, and she writes for sort of a French news channel and things like that. But she struggles to make enough money to live on, because writers nowadays do not make money, because the writing's been so devalued by the internet and everything else, and even more devalued by AI and everything, won't it? Because that's really tough. You've got people. What we're doing, anything creative,
And it's
yeah.
Al, I want to chime in with you on that, and not to interrupt you, but what you brought up, one of the biggest points. Phil, tell me what you think about this. In rap music and in hip hop and other stuff, we used to sample. You could make a beat if you wanted yourself manually, or you hear something you like and you sample the drum break and you loop it over and over. So people had a whole revolution of, should we pay for that? Did you clear that? And then some artists were like, well, I wouldn't be as popular now if somebody didn't rediscover me. You had all these arguments. So then it went into like a neutral thing where people just weren't doing it anymore. Now we come back to where the kids are doing, and they have stems where you have technology where you can just take the vocals out. You can take any instrument you want right at your fingertips. You don't have to be at any like top rated studio. But my thing is this: when they have AI tools like Emergent, where you can literally just copy a website or an app, you can just copy it. So like if you say, hey, I want to copy this movie, and then you change this around, you change that. They have law. I don't think they even have the laws to govern all the stuff that you can copy with AI tools. Now you can steal whole movies, whole concepts, and like it's not even a problem. I mean, like it's not just a record anymore, is what I'm saying. You can like get anything while it's the Wild Wild West now.
No, it's true. It's true, and it's worrying. I mean, I was on holiday recently with we take holidays in Norfolk in the forest quite often, because we got the dog that's a bit old, so we can't really go abroad and leave her. But we were on holiday with Yanni's son and grandson and his wife, and he knows a bit about AI and stuff like that, and he said to me, tell me what, I can make you a good cover for the dark side. And I told him, I said, well, okay, a vampire attacking a girl or something like that. Just that. And and in about 3 minutes, this image came up, and it was excellent. I shared it on Facebook. I said, look at this, it was just an AI image, and then everybody was going, you're not going to do this, are you, for your cover? I said, no, we're not, because we have an artist who does our covers, but I'm just saying that I'm just putting it on there because this guy. And then I said to him, this is amazing. He said, do you want to see any changes? I said, well, have her drinking a glass of Coke. And then and it's got this girl with a vampire attack, and she's drinking it. And I was saying, it's quite scary. It's really scary. because I have this thing, you know. I mean, I would never use because my artist is Rick is my good friend, and we always I love artists, especially drawing covers anyway. And Graham Humphreys is another of my best friends who's very well known in the area of doing stuff like this. And I said, I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying that I'm just pointing out that this is what can be done. It's crazy. And also, if you wanted to write an article, say about the Phantom of the Opera, you could ask AI to do it for you, and it would probably be quite acceptable, you know, for a general magazine. So if the magazine's got no budget, they could probably go, yeah, let's just put that in there. But I don't think they'll have that human touch that, you know, stuff that there's something that there's something, you know, there is something inhuman about what they do. So it's almost, it's like, you know, there are a lot of artists who are very good out there, but they use Photoshop and it looks like the original. And you in other words, they might take a scene from a film and use that. And you think, well, why don't we just use the scene from the film as the cover instead? And that's always been my thing. You know, it's I do like arty covers, you know, and I do like sort of original art. That's why we have all our covers are specially done. And Rick, my artist, he's very, very quick, and he'll knock out paintings in a day, less than a day. So if I want something special, he'll just do it for me. Yeah.
And Phil's our AI artist, and he's actually done I think he did 2 covers for my books. And yeah, it's really nice. I mean,
it feels nice with it. It feels real handy.
I'm not anti. It's with us, and that's it, and it's going to be used.
I know exactly what Alan's saying, because I've written 2 books too and had them published, and I actually paid artists to do the artwork for those books. But those books cost me about $3,000 a piece worth of artwork.
No, that's it. That's the way it will be, though, Phil. I mean, it's like, you know, if you're gonna, what's the choice? You know, I mean, we don't pay our Rick because he sells the originals, so he sells the paintings.
You've got a loophole. It cost me $3,000 a piece for the artwork for my 2 books that I published. Our podcast isn't making any money, so I'm only using it for thumbnails. So the AI is cheap and it's fast. And, you know, it's sometimes it's better than the picture that, you know, we end up with from the guest or whatever. And it's just a way to get attention.
I would be doing that if I was in the same situation. In other words, if we needed to, you know, if we were paying for Rick to do our covers, I mean, we generally use for Infinity, you know, like recognized artwork, and you know, we've got so much good artwork that is around. I mean, look, this latest issue of Infinity, we use the artwork from Poseidon Adventure.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Which is really good. You know, it's kind of fun. And Rick did for the latest Dark Side, we've got Frank Langella as Dracula, which is
awesome.
That's an original bit of artwork. So it's great.
Beautiful. I remember that one from when I was a kid watching that on HBO when it first came out.
But I you know, going back to we're talking earlier on about the age of people who read these magazines, and I and you know what you said, Phil, was you know was right about the fact that, you know, the youngsters nowadays look at stuff on. I mean, I've got a massive screen TV and a projector, and I want to see stuff as big as. And I say to my daughter, "You want to watch something? I will watch it on my phone or on my laptop." And I go, "What?" You know, and it is true to say that if you are doing a magazine for young horror fans, it ain't going to sell many copies, because I think they'd rather just see the film. They don't really want to read about it and they don't have this big. It's only those of us who are really into this whole era that want to read about Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and some of the great films. And, you know, most people think, who the hell's Peter Cushing, you know?
Boris Karloff.
Yeah.
Lon Chaney.
That's way back. He's talking about the Hammer guys. The Hammer guys from the 70s are the guys that my grandfather used to wake me up in the middle of the night because they only came on late. and he'd make we would eat tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches and watch the old Hammer classics together. And they're some of the best memories I have in my life. And I still won't eat ketchup to this day because that one where the girl falls out of the bottom of the bell and she's hanging upside down and she's covered with blood. And I guess I got upset as a 5-year-old, and my aunt was trying to tell me, "Oh no, it's just ketchup." Well, that was the wrong thing to say because I haven't had ketchup since then.
And it looks like ketchup, doesn't it? I always think it's a pity that Peter Cushing and Whoopi Goldberg didn't get married because she was doing Whoopi Cushing.
Oh, because
Anyway, sorry, I had to get one bad joke in on this one. Yeah.
Alan, you know who else,
classic. Oh my God.
Alan, you know who else reads your magazine? Mr. Lobo, who was a horror host.
Oh, really? I'll tell you
Yeah.
something. Tell you something. I know who else reads it. Okay, so, I've known a few directors over the years, and a guy called Pat Jankowitz, who's one of our writers, and he was at a thing with Joe Dante, and he said, I've got a piece coming up in the dark side, and Joe Dante said, I've just bought the latest issue. So Joe Dante obviously buys art. Yeah, but I've met him on occasion. But he's a big horror fan because
I met Mr. Lobo at a party, and then I did an interview with him, and then he mentioned your magazine that he reads it every once in a while.
I'll have to look up Mr. Lobo. He's a horror host, is he?
Yes.
I see. I love this horror host. We don't have those things over here. Horror hosts. We never had those. They're just like an American thing, really.
That's how Elvira got started.
Yeah, Elvira, I used to write. Well, I wasn't writing for a magazine, but I was a letter hat for the Elvira comic book. And Elvira, she responded to one of my emails, and she says, "Oh, you're our #1 fan." And she came to Sacramento. I was supposed to go over there and see her, and something came up, and I couldn't go. It was some kind of family thing.
Didn't go.
No, and I could kick myself in the butt on that.
Yeah, so
Well, she's a really good friend of my good friend Sam Irving. And Sam is a good pal. We came over to do an event with us, and but we did have a little bit of a problem because Rick drew a cover of Elvira. Actually, I'll show you. I've got it framed. Well, I've got one version. This is Rick's Elvira picture.
You good?
Oh, Elvira, yes.
Yeah, and so he drew that picture. He drew that, and then it was going to be on the cover of the magazine to go with Sam Irving's big interview, which won him a Rondo Award, actually. And but then Elvira's agent went mad and said, "You can't do pictures without my permission." So it was
I get paid. She's got to get paid
because apparently everything has to be licensed. When you're a celebrity figure and all that sort of stuff. And so there was a little bit of a wobble on that one, but in the end it all worked out okay. But we love getting these sort of big stars over. We do get a certain amount of people over from America every year, but we have a load of people over here. So I'm actually doing a Video Nasties Day in August, which I'm going to get hopefully get some people over from some of the mostly the Italian people will come over for that, I think. So that'll be quite fun to do. But I do love doing the festivals. They're good fun. And
you meet a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, they're so nice. Ours are very social events. We have had lots of good guests over to in the past. This is our eighth one this year, and they just get bigger and better. But it's been so nice because after a while you're like, you're kind of like, I can imagine it must be being like a bit like a schoolmaster, okay, where you've got a whole load of new pupils. It takes you a little while to get used to the names of every one of them, but all the people now come to our events, I'm starting to know who they are, and because and nothing worse, you're chatting to somebody and someone comes up and you don't know who it is, you can't introduce them to the next person who comes up. But I do like the whole social aspect of it. It's really nice to know these people. Some of these guys are, there's one or two of these young guys, they're in their 20s, and you think, how do they, but they're still massive fans, and they love doing these things. Like, I don't know if people like this in America as well, but they love going around all these little locations for some of their favorite films, you know, and looking to see where they were made. That's a whole industry, really, you know, going back and looking about where things were made. And certainly around near where I live, there's a location for the Earth Dies Screaming. That's literally about 8 miles away from where and it's still unchanged because it's a grade 2 listed village, basically, so you can go around there. And I do love all that stuff. And I think, to me, as I say, it's the nostalgia. And my dad used to say to me, right, where he used to say, you wouldn't, if you've been through a world war, you wouldn't love horror. And I said, no, you're wrong, because what the horror I love is not necessarily people being chopped in half. Yes, I do like gory films as well, but generally, my favourites are the kind of cozy, atmospheric, old-fashioned things. And, you know, some sort of, you know.
Did you like Final Destination?
I haven't seen the new one yet. My daughter says it's pretty good. I was like the one with the logs, which is the second one. She says that's not the best one, so I don't know. You know, I think we do a trivia question about. I can throw it to you actually while we're talking about Final Destination. Have you seen the first one?
Oh yes.
Okay, so what's the disaster in that one?
The Seattle Tower, and they go through the floor.
No, come on. It's an airplane.
Airplane.
And here's the final part.
Okay.
It's the airplane. Here's the final part of your question. Where's that airplane going to?
Whoa.
Oh, I forget.
It's a good trivia question, though.
That is a good trivia question. I'll let that to you.
Okay, then. It's going to Paris. Yeah. I've watched that loads of times. But anyway, that's probably apparently one of the best ones. But I think I like those films, actually. I do like those. I think they're all good fun. You know where they're going, but they're kind of, yeah, they're kind of fun to watch no matter what. And, you know, the deaths are kind of cartoony, aren't they? They're gory. They're kind of cartoony. They're like stupid cartoon deaths.
Oh, shit.
Did you like Starship Troopers, a corny movie like that?
That was cartoony. So are we running out of time?
Yes. Allan, how can people reach you?
Well, they can look at the Dark Side site, which is www.thedarksidemagazine.com. Be careful though. There's a fetish magazine, which sounds very simple. You might end up somewhere because be careful. Don't blame me.
Yeah. I heard that.
Into a swingers party.
Speaking of the dark side, what about Blackula, William Marshall, the Shakespearean actor?